Good evening and welcome. Live from the United Methodist Church in Crescent City, it's the District 4 Supervisorial Candidate Forum, presented by Redwood Voice Youth Media and KFUG Community Radio, in partnership with the Wild Rivers Outpost and the Norte Triplicate. Here are tonight's moderators, Pastor Dana Gilport of the United Methodist Church and Grant Merriweather from Redwood Voice Youth Media.
Grant, and yes, welcome everyone. As Grant said, I'm Pastor Dana Gilport, pastor of the beautiful church that's hosting the venue tonight. We're going to be hearing from each of the four candidates running for District 4, sitting right here in front of us. Please be sure to introduce yourselves in your opening statements. And please remember that unless you are sitting in front of a microphone, masks are to be worn in proper form and fashion over your nose and under your chin at all times.
Tonight, our questions will be asked by a panel of media representatives composed of Mike Thornton from KFUG Community News, Jessica Saynar Andrews from Wild Rivers Outpost, Monique Camarena from Redwood Voice, and Dan Schmidt from the Triplicate.
And each question posed will allow for a 2-minute response from each candidate uninterrupted. After everyone is finished, there will be a final 2 minutes for the panelists to ask any follow-up or clarifying questions, which would give each of you 30 seconds. When you're having your uninterrupted 2 minutes, I will give you a 30-second warning verbally. And please keep an eye on your 2 minutes, even though I'm going to be giving you a 30-second warning. And if you go over your 2 minutes, I will lovingly remind you. And then if you fail to listen to me, I will continue to less lovingly remind you.
We'll begin tonight with the 2-minute opening statements from each candidate. We'll begin with Brian Stone.
Good evening. I hope you can hear me. Good evening. My name is Brian Stone. I would like to thank everyone for inviting me this evening. Currently, I'm serving as your Harbor Commissioner, one of 5. I have over 23 years of local government and state employment, as well as 21 years of private experience in the private sector, 8 years owning my own business. I have a proven track record in this county. When I joined the Harbor, it was running a $498,000 a year negative cash flow and would have been bankrupt within 3 years. Currently, in the upcoming year, the projections are that we could reach $1.3 million positive cash flow. We've been able to turn the harbor around. Understanding how both the private sector works and both the government works is one of my strengths. I'm the only candidate with that type of experience. Our next supervisor needs to have a complete vision of how and where the county should be going. It will not change overnight. And I have four basic goals. First one is to address affordable housing. Second is to find good paying jobs for this community. The third is to rebuild our roads, bridges, highways, and infrastructure. And finally, the fourth is to find alternative funding sources at the county and do similar to what we did at the harbor. Please visit my website, www.brianlstone.com, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for your opening statement. The next candidate for their opening statement is Margaret Sargent.
I assume my time starts when I start talking?
Mm-hmm.
I could tell you of my accomplishments in my life, of being a CNA, being part of the American State Assemblies, working on common law, and behavioral sciences that I've studied. But my biggest accomplishments have been raising my 3 kids. It's been so challenging and the most rewarding, as well as my very first job, choker setting in this community, working with Danny Peoples and Dennis Gill. I really feel that because of my experience in my life, that community is the most natural form of mental health, and bringing community together because our volunteers have been making huge impacts in this community. We just need more. We need more of us. I want to promote meetings for the people, to have people come together and know already what it is that the districts will be talking about and what they're going to be voting on, so that way we do have an opinion before, the people will have an opinion before it is actually voted on. I want us to focus on sustainability for our food in this county. Working together by doing that will bring us together as a unit, focused on one goal of security, and that will bring us together for our mental health. Thank you.
Thank you for your opening statement. The next candidate for their opening statement is Joey Borges.
My name is Joey Borges, and I'm here because I seem to always end up, whenever there's a need to be filled, I end up showing up. I'm kind of a problem solver, so whenever there's people in need, I end up there. Started when I brought my kids into school. The local PTSO was falling apart and ended up needing hundreds of kids were going to be out of their Redwood School Carnival. So I stepped in and built up the PTSO, gathered up a great group of kids and made it successful, and we did wonderful projects. That led into football, so then I was needed there. Now there's hundreds of kids able to play youth outdoor sports every year. Football, wrestling, basketball, whatever is needed, I end up there. Now my kids are older, and I feel like I've, kind of started from the bottom, and now I've made my way to here. And so I'm here because there's a need in the county. We need a new vision, we need new ideas, we need new attitudes. And so I'm here to fill that need. Thank you.
Thank you for your opening statement. The next candidate for their opening statement is Patty Adams.
Good evening. Thank you for the invitation from Redwood Voice to be here today. My name is Patty Adams, and I'm running for Board of Supervisors. I grew up in this district on Moorhead Road. My parents were Peter and Jeanette Nesbitt, and I have two sisters as well. My dad owned Crescent Construction. He was a logger and later in life became a professional beekeeper. My mother, Jeanette, is a Yurok and Karuk tribal member who encouraged us to pursue the 4-H group, which was very active in Fort Dick. She also worked outside of the home for Dahlstrom and Watt in the lily fields. I went to Redwood Elementary, then Del Norte, then continued my education at CSU Chico, earning a bachelor's degree in organizational communications. After college, I moved to the Bay Area, where I spent 30-plus years working for Fortune 500 companies such as General Electric, Ryder Transportation, Chrysler, and Coda Automotive. What I learned during my tenure with these companies included finding new opportunities, working with a diverse group of individuals, negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts, and successfully growing a portfolio of business. In 2016, I moved back to Del Norte, married Harry Adams, and recognized that I wanted to be more involved in our community. I became a realtor and worked for David Finnegan Real Estate. With Harry, we own and operate a charter fishing business. As I began the process of running for office, I reached out to as many key stakeholders in our community that I could. Jerry Hemmingson, Darren Short, Valerie Starkey, Chris Howard, as well as Anil Lopez, Daphne Cortez-Lambert, etc. This is part of my research or learning process and how I would approach my role if elected as Board of Supervisors, to fact check and gain knowledge so that I can make informed decisions, not just accept that this is the way it's done.
30.
In closing, I would like to improve Del Norte County, and with my experiences both local and elsewhere, this will allow me to bring a voice of change for our community. Thank you.
Thank you for your opening statement.
Our first panelist tonight is Dan Schmidt from the Del Norte Triplicate. Please remember that each question posed by the panelists will allow for a 2-minute response from each of the candidates, uninterrupted, and I'll be giving that 30-second warning. After everyone is finished, there will be again a final 2 minutes from the panelists to ask any follow-up or clarifying questions, should they have any, and you will each get 30 seconds to respond. Dan?
Thank you. Ms. Adams, if Del Norte County was to be awarded a multi-million-dollar grant to build, say, 200-unit homeless housing project, how would you separate those who have become homeless due to drug addiction, serious mental illness, or repeat criminality from those who are homeless due to economic hardship, such as a recently single mother with small children, or the death or catastrophic injury or illness of a spouse or breadwinner?
Those are such different entities. So I would hope that if this were such a large grant, that there would be the ability to have two or separation between the two groups. Because I feel that someone who has been recently displaced due to financial hardship or circumstances is far different than someone who could be suffering from mental illness or substance abuse issues, mental health, etc. And both of those groups need individual guidance. So the person that's recently displaced might just need a transitional housing situation until they can get permanent housing. They might need more assistance along the lines of job training or mentoring assistance in that form. As far as the other group, which is, I think, a bit more challenging, they're going to need a wraparound. They would need both the housing plus the programs that would assist them with any of their substance abuse issues, medication, etc. That's what I would do.
Thank you. Mr. Borges, sir, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, very briefly, if we have this large grant to build a 200-unit housing project, how would you separate those who have a drug addiction, mental illness, or have suffered through repeat criminality from those who are homeless due to economic hardship or catastrophic illness or have small children?
So to separate the two, you would basically you'd set up a set of accountability. Those who just recently came across the hardship is going to do everything they possibly can to get out of that hardship. So if you set up a drug classes, work classes, things that they need to check off their list to accomplish to be able to qualify for this housing, they're going to separate themselves. The drug addict type people who aren't real interested in helping themselves aren't going to be as apt to attend these meetings and attend these classes and to do everything they possibly can to improve their quality of life.
Thank you, sir. And then, Ms. Sargent, how would you handle a situation? How would you deal with a 200-unit housing project? All these people are homeless. They come together. You have a 200-unit complex. Would you put the people who have mental illness or drug addiction or have repeat criminal behavior into the same facility as those with small children or who have physical infirmities or catastrophic illnesses that have led to their homelessness?
Actually, I would have to agree with Joey a lot because I think accountability has a lot to do with it. There will be a separation of the types of people depending on the actions that they take. I really believe in our community as our natural mental health. To build community, we've had a lot of volunteers. We need more volunteers within our community to teach our children forward how to sustain our county as the framers of the county started, and we're losing that grasp on that view due to our disconnections. And if we could focus on having the accountability and the volunteering, and the ones that are willing to be part of the answer will present themselves when there is accountability to be done, and then they will follow through with doing volunteering or doing the different programs they're needing to do for their mental health. And as that unfolds, you'll be able to see a break in the different types of people that we're looking at, rather than just summing them up as to one.
Very well, thank you. And Mr. Stone?
Well, I think first we have to understand the problem. First of all, there are different classes of homelessness. You can have the drug addicted, and you can also have individuals who are homeless, and you can also have low-income people, and you can also have moderate-income people who cannot find housing. There are four separate and distinct areas. Federal government, when it makes grants, if they're going to build a housing unit, would typically be Title VIII. They would go to the point of you'd have to apply to get into it, and that would be the middle class to low-income individuals, depending upon their needs and whether or not they can meet the qualifications. There are other programs like the one that we have where the hotel was taken over downtown here, which was a state program. That's completely different. So each program is different, and they are tailored and have certain requirements and certain things under the law. As a supervisor, you try and get the loans and make sure these things are put together properly. As far as the supervisor separating out the individuals, that's where Health and Human Services come in, that's where the individual grants come in, and where they're broken apart. So government is a very complicated animal, and you have to follow the laws and the rules that go along with it. And that's the short answer.
Thank you.
Do you have any follow-up questions?
Very briefly, what do you do about the people that fall through the cracks? Ms. Sargent, what about the ones that just don't step up to the plate and take action to remedy their problems? What do you do with those people?
Well, unfortunately, if they're not choosing to be part of some answer for themselves and for the community, they're unfortunately choosing, they'll need more enforcement for them to be having more supports for mental health. Trying to force those who really are not willing or wanting, though, the law will need to take in account for that one, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Mr. Borges.
You can't help those who don't want to help themselves. You incentivize, you give them every option you possibly can, and you show them the right pathway, and it's up to them at some point.
So I'm not familiar with the name of the program, but I understand that down in Humboldt County, they have a program where there is a mobile vehicle that goes around to the homeless, and I assume it's this sort of situation that you're describing, where it's people that through their own choice may not want to be in that program. And so they go around and they assess each individual.
Is that Mission Possible? No?
Something else.
Very well. And Mr. Stone, sir?
Would you repeat the question?
Yes. What do you do about people who just slip through the cracks, won't participate, don't seek help, but yet they're out there and creating problems, and they have problems?
First of all, you've got to identify them. As part of a program, you're going to need to find out who they are. You're going to have to offer them wraparound services. In other words, if they're a drug addict, you're going to have to be able to deal with their mental as well as their physical health needs. If it's just simply that it's a psychological problems, it falls into a different category. So this is all coming together with what is taken up with Health and Human Services.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Monique Camarena from Redwood Voice.
Thank you. In Del Norte County, youth vaping is a major issue in our school district and impacts the health of our community. A model tobacco retail license has been proposed to the City Council and Board of Supervisors by local youth. Some license provisions include the regulation of tobacco and nicotine product sales, restriction of flavored tobacco products, and the restriction of nicotine products displays and ads in youth-friendly areas. Do you support a tobacco retail license ordinance that includes these provisions? And if enforcing a TRL is impossible, what would be your solution to the youth vaping issue?
Mr. Stone, we'll start with you.
Yes, I'm in favor of some sort of program. The specific one, I'd have to read it to understand it. But my own belief is that we need to keep youth vaping from happening with our youth. We need to do away with the flavors that the children try and get into, which will basically addict them on into the future with nicotine problems. So yes, it's something that needs to happen. There needs to be enforcement provisions that come with it for the retailers that are selling the products. So short answer is yes. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Ms. Sargent.
Yes, there needs to be guidelines, but also community action, I believe, needs to happen too. if we have more commercialization through with the community, posting things, more education for the children to understand what kind of health risks they really are looking at, especially this new vaping stuff. There's new evidence of what's happening there and what's happening to our health there. And just trying to be sure to help encourage in the schools, promote in the schools, and have them understand, especially at a younger age, the grade schoolers, to really be aware of this. So maybe once they get in high school and they're a little less, caring, to take action to not do it for themselves.
Thank you.
Mr. Burgess?
Well, at some point, it falls on the parents. It's not the county government's job to parent your children. Parents need to be involved. They need to tell their kids, hey, you know what? Don't do this. It's not a good idea. I have children. I have this conversation with my children. If you enforce more government licensing on businesses, sure, it'll restrict that business. But if you go to the store and they don't have your right flavor Gatorade, you're going to go to the next store. You're going to go to the next one until you get it. At some point, you need the parents to step in and enforce things on their children. It's not always the government's job to solve everything.
Thank you.
Ms. Adams?
I do not support a retail tax. I feel that it's negatively impacting our businesses. We're a small community. We need every tax dollar we can get. I feel that it is the parents' job to teach their children. And when it's teenagers, you feel like you can live forever. You don't recognize the dangers, and certainly not the dangers that might hit you when you're 40. So it is education. We do have a friend whose daughter did get into vaping. She started with nicotine. The high wasn't that great. She switched to weed. That was better. They found out, they took it away because the vape pen itself is just a mechanism. They can get it on the internet, so they don't have to buy it locally. For that matter, the product that goes inside of it also. There has been talk about putting sensors in the bathrooms to detect the steam or vape. I think that would be great, because what the kids are doing when they're at school on their breaks, parents have no control over, teachers have no control over because of privacy. So I think it does come down to the family and their education, their speaking, their communication. That's what I think.
Thank you.
Any follow-up questions?
Not at the moment.
Our next panelist question is from Jessica St. Andrews of Wild Rivers Outpost.
In 2020, Del Norte County voters narrowly approved Measure R, which levied a 1% sales tax outside the Crescent City limits. It was initially projected to generate $1.2 million in revenue annually and is now expected to generate $1.8 million through the end of the fiscal year. In your opinion, is Measure R a benefit to the county? Why yes or why no?
We'll start with Ms. Sargent.
Measure R is for the support for our infrastructure of our first responders and for our basic infrastructure for the county, and I am for that. I think that having more taxes, unfortunately, I know not a lot of people are going to want to hear that, but to get us out from underneath the grants that keeps our private properties under in hostage that we've been borrowing, the bonds that we've been borrowing from. Doing that, puts us all at risk as a community, and we need to actually focus on more of those things that helps within our infrastructure in specific ways. I am for that, and for a little more of that, just to keep us from being at risk as a community for our private properties and for the rest of our county.
Thank you. Mr. Burgess?
I am not in favor of the Measure R tax increase. The money needs to be found within our budget. the things that are being provided for, or soon to be provided through the Measure R funds, are all necessary, but they need to be found within our budget. It needs to have a hard look. We need to cut corners or cut funding from certain things, and that's what needs to happen. Just to continually keep putting that on the backs of the taxpayers is not okay. Increased taxes is not beneficial to our local businesses. I do not agree with the Measure R. No.
Thank you. Ms. Adams.
I am in favor of it. The voters already voted this into effect, and it has been huge for our community. Where else could we find this windfall that we're able to buy vehicles, employ others, give raises? We already have so many employees in our county and city that are severely underpaid for their positions. We can't attract people. This has been such a huge benefit, and I would not support a repeal of it. Granted that it's a sales tax, and I feel that that's a benefit because partly it's being paid by our tourists that are coming through our community, and they're not feeling it because there are so many other counties in California that have much higher sales tax. If it were a property tax, I'd be very much against it, but it is a sales tax. I've also talked to business owners who are not feeling the impact because it is such a small percentage. But it's so huge the way it benefits us with this small percentage of sales tax. So no, I would not be in favor of a repeal. And I would hate to see what would happen if we did repeal it, because where would we find the funding to pay for these employees that we have been able to successfully hire?
Thank you. Mr. Stone.
Could I have the question repeated, please?
In 2020, Del Norte County voters narrowly approved Measure R, which levied a 1% sales tax outside Crescent City limits. It was initially projected to generate $1.2 million in revenue annually and is now expected to generate $1.8 million through the end of the fiscal year. In your opinion, is Measure R a benefit to the county? Why yes or why no?
Why yes? The answer is yes. The voters voted it in already. It's been an item that's been decided. What we're talking about here is a larger issue of funding government. Somebody has to pay for the roads, somebody has to pay for the library, somebody has to pay for the schools, and so on. When I was working for the state controller's office, I worked for them right during Prop 13. I was a lead analyst / auditor on the reapportionment of the funds for AB 8. And I can tell you the devastation that Prop 13 did to the local governments. It literally gutted local government. Now, taking the harbor as an example, there are alternative ways of generating and finding funds. They are called alternative revenue streams, and they can be made and they can work. I have already identified one that I would like to see happen at the county, and it deals with TOT tax, which is on the bed and breakfast routine. That is not being properly regulated and followed. There are other ways to generate money, but this estimate and, this measure has already been settled. I'm in favor of it. We need the money to pay for the things that we said we were going to do. We do have a windfall of about $600,000. So I think in the long run, we need the money to do this. We can't keep running around and training individuals and having them take off and go down the road to the next county. We need to offer the same benefit packages as the other counties. We need to do these things, but it takes time to build the revenue base. Okay? And so it's all in understanding how the tax structure works. And that's something I've dealt with. Thank you.
Any follow-up questions or clarifying questions?
Not at this moment, no.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Mike Thornton from KFUG Community News.
Thank you. And first, thank all of you for stepping up to run for public office, and thank you for being here this evening. From the accounts published in the Sacramento Bee to the sudden resignation of Sheriff Apperson, charges of felony voter fraud against Sheriff Waltz, Lieutenant Schnegg testifying to the Board of Supervisors that the Del Norte County Sheriff's Office is on the verge of not being able to provide 24/7 law enforcement services, to recent pictures showing horrendous conditions in the jail cell of a mentally ill inmate in the Del Norte County Jail. It seems safe to say that the Del Norte Sheriff's Office is in a state of crisis. My understanding is that some 70% of Del Norte County's discretionary budget is already allocated to law enforcement purposes. So what can you, as a county supervisor, do to remedy this situation and ensure that the residents of Del Norte County have a sheriff's office they can trust and depend upon?
We'll hear first from Mr. Burgess.
So the sheriff's office has had a lot of turnover here lately. So there's a major lack of leadership and accountability and chain of command. So there's a lot of internal issues going on there that is hopefully going to be cleaned up when the new sheriff is taken and brought on. I talked to a lot of current and ex-sheriff's officer or deputies, and I asked them, because I questioned about the money and why is it hard to keep people staffed, and it's because mainly of lack of leadership, lack of accountability, and lack of support. It's not necessarily completely financial. And so with getting new leadership in there, holding people accountable, and other issues of accountability throughout the county that need to step into place in our jails. The issue with the dirty jail cell, or however you want to call it, the unacceptable jail cell, there's only 2 bailiffs in there running 70, 80, 90 inmates, and they're not getting a lot of support. And so, yes, it is their fault for not seeing that, but now where's our health and nurses that were in there? We're paying $1.4 million now for these nurses to come through and take care of these people in the jails. Where were they at during this? Why are they not being held accountable for this? Everybody's just blaming another and blaming another. And why is our Health and Human Services not in there and checking on the health and the services of these humans in the jail? There's a huge lack of accountability, and it needs to be addressed. And I think that under new leadership and through support of the county supervisors, I think that's all going to be turned around.
Next will be Ms. Adams.
So I think that there should be, whether it's an audit or an oversight, why couldn't we have an oversight committee for the sheriff's department? It seems like there have been a long time of these faux pas, these tragedies, these incidences, and it seems like there should be greater scrutiny. I understand that there's been a lack of accountability, that there's been turnover, but there's been so much that maybe they need to have a reboot and have more eyes on them. I understand with the mentally ill person that was trashed their cell, if I were the nurse that was there, I wouldn't feel safe going in there. How many people does it take to handle one mentally ill patient on a regular basis when they've got 70 or 80 other inmates? I can see where, unfortunately, somebody slipped through the cracks, especially if he had to be physically restrained in order to provide medication or clean the cell. I'm not forgiving there or trying to sweep it under the carpet, but I do see that that was an isolated incident. But yeah, there are a lot of things that could be improved with our sheriff's department and the building and the situation there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Stone?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say I found a picture of the jail cell appalling. But we need to understand a few things about the sheriff's department. 1, yes, we need new leadership. 2, it is understaffed. 3, we need to find ways to fund it. 4, there is funding available through the Infrastructure Act that was passed by the federal government, signed by Joe Biden, and so on. And they do have money in there for infrastructure. Jails are one of them that are specifically named. We need to have a specific grant writer on staff at the county to apply for these grants and this funding. We can get funding for the jail itself to have a nice jail, have something new. I know that we have to put up a certain percentage of the money, but at the same time, we can do things that will improve it. We just can't let it fester. We can't sit there with a jail that has mold in it, and we cannot keep doing this, arrest and release routine that we're doing. So there's a number of real problems. And where do we start? That's the first question. We start by taking care of the administrative needs, and that's the responsibility of the Board of Supervisors. They need to provide adequate funding, and this Measure R is doing some of that work. Like I said earlier, there are ways to come up with alternative revenue streams, okay? Finding things in the budget where the people are not doing the job properly and we're losing money because of it. So there are ways. This is going to be a long, long process. It's going to take quite a bit of time to do it, and it's not an easy, quick fix. So I'm just hope that everybody would understand that being a supervisor, you're going to have to deal with these extremely hard issues. You're going to have to study it and be able to try and parse your way through the problems to understand all of the facets of it. That's my 10 cents worth.
Ms. Sargent.
I believe that grants and bonds puts our community at risk. When we can focus on our community, helping ourselves, yes, I know that taxes are not necessarily the most comfortable thing, but when it does release our community of being at risk of our personal properties and such, it is a huge security. And I don't have any doubts upon the new sheriff, Garrett Scott. I know his heart and leadership. He is very much about accountability and structure. And within his grounding and views, I believe we won't have as much of an issue there to have to worry about. It is a complicated thing, and if we could actually use taxes that we provide ourselves, we can choose what we want with those taxes, and if we want to create another jail, we can do that as well. I believe that the power is in the people of this community because many hands make light work. Thank you.
Any follow-up questions?
I do have a follow-up question. Despite repeated requests, to the best of my knowledge, there has been no accounting for how long this inmate was held in this cell in the conditions that we have seen in the photographs. So, to be clear, no one is asking for any HIPAA-protected health information, just simply how long this inmate was held in the conditions that were depicted in the pictures of that cell. We've been unable to get an answer to that. Do you believe that the residents of Del Norte have a right to know the answer to that question? And if elected as a county supervisor, will you use your position to make sure that that kind of transparency is standard operating procedure when it comes to the Del Norte County Sheriff's Office and the jail?
Don't forget you have 30 seconds, and I'll try to give you a 10-second warning. Ms. Adams, you can go first.
I think that those pictures were scandalous. They were titillating. They were designed to spark a direct response. Do I think that there should be more visibility, more transparency? Yes. Regarding whether we could have a grant to fund this, we're trying to hire a grant writer as a county, but they're
10 seconds.
Slightly concerned about the Measure R funds possibly going away, so they're a little hesitant. They have hired another admin clerk to assist the sheriff's duties.
Time. Thank you. Mr. Stone?
Yeah, first of all, there are other ways that we can fund things to take care of this issue. And I'll come right to your question. With respect to that individual, yes, as a supervisor, I would want to look into it. But That's the purview of the grand jury. That's one of the things they should be doing. When they see a thing that happens like that, they should be sitting right on top of it and asking the question. I served on the grand jury for 1.5 years, so I understand that that's one of their responsibilities. Thank you.
Ms. Sargent.
Yes, I would think that it would be worth looking into to see if there is any real health risks and trauma to that individual. Could the picture have been posted because it's just to get a reaction? I personally did not see the picture. I'm not sure. So I could only guess. It said mold and things.
Time.
So yes, you should look into it, but I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you ask the question one more time?
Yeah, sure. The simple version of it is we've been unable to get a straight answer about how long this inmate was held in the conditions that are depicted in those photographs. Do you believe that the people of Del Norte are entitled to have that information? And if you are elected county supervisor, will you use your position to ensure that that type of transparency is standard operating procedure?
Yeah, I believe transparency is key throughout the whole county. So yes, I do believe that. Us as a county are liable for everything that goes on in this county. And so people need to know what's happening and need to know what is going on throughout our county. So yes.
Thank you.
Our next question will come again from Dan Schmidt from the Del Norte Triplicate. Dan?
Thank you. Thank you. Well, also related to the jail, we have a situation regularly where people are released very quickly upon arrest, almost a kitchen release type of a situation, or they are not held long enough to serve the sentences that were imposed on them. Yet, as we've heard tonight, people who haven't even been convicted of a crime remain and linger in custody. So, how do we keep the career criminals from being released back into the streets where they commit more crimes or disappear across state lines to avoid further prosecution? And how do we get the jail to keep people from staying in jail who don't belong there? Let's, Mr. Stone, let's begin.
That's a complicated question, but to answer you straight up, the district attorney is the primary person that's going to have to make some decisions on whether that person stays in jail or what their offense is and whether or not things are going to happen. We've had individuals down at the harbor. We had one gentleman that's out there, was running around naked on the beach during the middle of the summertime. He was arrested, and 6 hours later, he's right back out there doing it again. So yeah, there's catch and release. It's true. It happens here. So how do we address it? Well, again, it's going to come down to the sheriff's department, how they write it up, what the district attorney wants to do about it, and what the courts want to do with regards to the policy itself. So I'm going to leave it right there and give some time to the others to speak.
Ms. Sargent?
Yes, I do agree. It is up to the district attorney and law enforcement. Maybe that is a thing that we are needing to prod and say, maybe looking into some other options that might work, that is within constitutional rights. But I'm not sure what the direct answer would be. But I think it is up to the law and how we can look at other options within their jurisdictions.
Mr. Burgess?
The simple answer and the easy answer is you do something wrong, you should be punished. I mean, you shouldn't just get a slap on the wrist so you can go back and do it again. There needs to be some teeth behind the crimes that are committed. Our DA needs to be a little more efficient, possibly. Maybe she needs assistance. I'm not sure on that end of it. But there needs to be accountability for the crimes you commit.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Adams?
I agree that there should be accountability and there should be teeth in it. It's very disheartening as a consumer to know that people are walking into stores and doing the smash and grabs and becoming more organized and doing it across state lines, that the large retailers are having to hire their own private police force basically to take care of their stores. I don't know if it's a staffing issue that causes it, if it's the DA that causes the release so soon. I don't know if we have funding to do other things, like put not the bracelet, but the ankle thing on them, or if we'd be able to track them, but at least somebody would be able to see that they have been identified as breaking the law, and obviously they have that on for a reason.
Thank you.
Any follow-up or clarifying questions?
Yeah, I think so. Our county is equipped with a 48-bed juvenile hall right next to the fairground. We're probably all familiar with that. Yet, frequently, almost always, it has less than or fewer than half a dozen offenders who are placed there, yet they maintain a full staff. Should that facility be repurposed into an adult custodial facility to expand our capacity to hold those who have been prosecuted so that they're not released into the streets prematurely?
And we'll start with Ms. Sargent.
That's an interesting idea. Well, if that were to happen and have that be more of an adult situation, then we'd have to look at what would we be doing with the youth, because we definitely need the youth support. Now, what about Barrow? Why not open Barrow back up and look for that option? Because I don't think it was very right of them to just shut it down because of that movie that was built.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Burgess?
Could you ask that again?
Yes, should the 48-bed juvenile facility be repurposed to accommodate adult custodial inmates?
So the juvenile facility uses up a large budget, but do I think it should go away? This time, I don't think so. There's ways to limit the budget by sharing multi-functions as far as like cooking or the healthcare that could work for the jails and the juvenile, but I don't think it should go away as of yet.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Adams?
Without knowing the condition of the juvenile hall, I wouldn't know if it's equipped with the same safety and security that the jail cells are. But otherwise, I think it sounds like a great idea if it were equal and like. Then, of course, the question is what happens with the juveniles? Are they held separately from the adults? But it certainly seems worth investigating.
Thank you.
Mr. Stone?
Well, there's a couple of things you have to consider. One, where are you going to place the juveniles? If you're going to move them out, you're going to have another facility for them. Two, is the facility that you're talking about up to standard? And I'd like to say it's a novel idea. It could be something that could be done. And we could put our quote-unquote catch and release individuals there. But so they would have at least a few days in jail to sit in front of a judge and answer for it rather than just having a citation issue.
Time.
So, I mean, these are all questions that have to be thought about, and these are questions that the...
Thank you, Mr. Stone.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Our next panelist is Monique Camarena from Redwood Voice.
Thank you. Addressing youth mental health and the lack of mental health services for youth in Del Norte County have been topics of concern for a long time. If elected, what will be on your agenda for improving access to quality mental health services for youth and creating an environment that supports mental health in our community?
And sorry, we'll start first with Mr. Burgess.
So improving mental health in our community for youth, is that the question? So I guess making it more readily available. Right now, Youth and Homeless Health has a fairly large budget, but yet it's not really geared towards the youth. It's more geared towards the adult side of it. Not to say it's not needed, but if you could open up more facilities and more counseling and more programs for the youth, you could almost start to head off the path before they become adults with mental health issues. So I think redirecting some of that to the youth would be a good start.
Thank you.
Ms. Adams?
I think that what would be helpful is if there were more support services within the high schools. Youth, you didn't say if it's high school or if it's middle school, but there's great resources there, and there could be more. So maybe more of an outreach also to the teachers to see if they could help suggest that some students may need some assistance. Obviously, more counseling, maybe even more of an outreach so that it's not a stigma, that it's okay to go seek therapy assistance, just like going to the doctor.
Mr. Stone?
It's a very complex issue. You have different types of mental health. You have those that are schizophrenic, those with depression, those that are tripping out because of drugs. You have all sorts of different things. And the question then comes down to, well, how do we parse them out? How do we set out the services? It's one thing to say, yeah, I love the idea. Question number 2 is always, how do we fund it? And we're in such bad condition as a county that we are really stifled on what we can do for the public. And this is why I keep saying we need to come back to this whole concept of revenue streams. I went to a convention in San Francisco a month ago, a wind power convention. You know what I paid for on my TOT tax? 25.5%. And what is that TOT tax for? It's for a myriad of different things. And that didn't drive the people away from coming. My point is that if we wanted to do some of these things, that's the whole point of a TOT tax. Because when you have individuals come from outside the area, they bring problems with them. They use our roads, they use our services. We can also tax them for this. And we are not taxing them for it. We're sitting here at a county that it has an 8% tax rate. We could increase the TOT. It would not keep people away. And that increase in funds would generate quite a bit of money. At the harbor, when the Measure C was passed this last year, we received $238,000 roughly. Okay? From a TOT tax that is specifically designed to be given to the harbor. You could do the same thing and specifically design certain programs and create money to do it. Okay? So there are ways of doing it. We just have to find the political will and the time to do it. Okay?
Thank you.
Ms. Sargent?
Could you repeat?
I'll
Please.
repeat again. If elected, what will be on your agenda for improving access to quality mental health services for youth and creating an environment that supports mental health in our community?
I very strongly think that community is, I'll say it again, the most natural form of mental health. If we're working together to show and lead the children on how to work together as a team, as a unit, this naturally builds mental health awareness because we're around each other and we can see and to speak to one another. It encourages education. And building the community together is huge in that. And I feel very strongly in becoming food sustainable within this county. We have plenty of land. And we are coming to a food shortage, as we've been warned. And then we can see that the 35,000 acres of rice land has been shut down in California, as well as our ducks, chickens, turkeys, nationwide. We are in a crisis right now, and we do need to be aware of that and make actions before we realize
30
that
seconds.
we are subject to prices or unavailable food that might be coming. By working together on that, we'll naturally build the mental health within the homeless, if they are choosing to come in and be part of the solution, and for the children to understand how the framers built this community, and also how to move forward in sustaining and having security, which is the base of our mental health with the Maslow's pyramid.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any follow-up or clarifying questions?
None at the moment.
Thank you. Our next panelist is again Jessica St. Andrews from Wild Rivers Outpost. Jessica.
Are there county departments or programs you feel aren't getting the attention they need? And as a county supervisor, how would you change that?
We'll go with Ms. Adams first.
I think almost all of our departments are not getting the attention they need, or the funding they need, or the staffing they need. But then what do? I think that all you can do is prioritize it, which I think the voters have done with the measure R and S. So I think our most critical pieces are health and safety, law enforcement, but it's not enough. So I think we just have to make the tough decisions to prioritize. You know, every department was formed for a reason, so they're all vital to the community. It's just a tough choice at times of what is the most important or the most critical.
Thank you. Mr. Stone?
Could you repeat the question?
Certainly. Are there any county departments or programs that you feel aren't getting the attention they need? And as a county supervisor, how would you change that?
Well, there's a whole specific slew. All of them need help, but specifically, code enforcement officer needs help. The sheriff's department needs help. Health and Human Services needs help. I mean, you could go right down the list, but as a supervisor, you're going to have to prioritize these things. And we're going to need to hear from the public. This is something that you have to tell the supervisors what you want and what your priorities are. As a supervisor, you're going to have to make decisions. That's one of the things I do right now as a harbor commissioner. You have to make decisions that affect people's lives. I mean, look at the RV parks. We just went through a homeless issue there, and we're working on it. So it's something that you have to do. You have to be able to put up with it, but you also have to understand that the public in and of itself is concerned, and those people will show up at meetings, and they will talk to you and tell you what it is. So again, when the budget is being done, that's when the county has to make some decisions as to how they want to do it and at what pace.
Thank you.
I'll leave it at that.
Ms. Sargent?
Yes, I believe that if we were to support the community to have meetings for themselves and be able to speak together and bring awareness to all the other groups within the harbor and the county and so on, within the sheriff's department, all of these different areas that are having issues, and bring it up in the meetings as a people. So we can start discussing that together before the issues are being actually voted upon, and actually start having some votes for ourselves, and not just be unaware of what's going on until the last minute, and then just make complaints that the decisions are being made that they don't agree with. I think that's ridiculous. I think just being aware as a people and going to the meetings ahead of time before they're actually brought to the tables to be voted on, I think is very important for number one, for these answers. Because I don't feel that just the 4 people for the district is going to have all of these answers and have them all right every time for what the majority of the view of the people concerned really have in mind for our community.
30 seconds.
So that is my biggest view on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Burgess?
Yeah, so of course we could argue that everybody, needs attention and needs help. But the two that stand out to me would be probably our road department and our building and maintenance. They're kind of limited and the ability to hire qualified and retain qualified staff and to train the current staff. In years past, the roads would be out paving, they would be taking care of all of our needs throughout the county, and they need to be supported a little better because that's our infrastructure that runs this entire county, and that's what everybody sees is the roads and the buildings falling down. So I believe that the maintenance, building, and road department needs a little more assistance.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions?
Not at this time.
All right.
Our next panelist is Mike Thornton from KFUG Community News.
Last week, Supervisor Howard talked about some 200 homeless young people in our community. At a relatively recent meeting of the County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Starkey talked about the number of homeless people in our community being between 500 and 800 people. Crescent City Council member Bo Smith has repeatedly raised the issue of people who are living in various types of RVs and vehicles on the streets of Crescent City. Over the years, a number of different groups and organizations have attempted to get some sort of transitional housing project built based on programs in Medford. And City of Arcata has recently moved forward with a safe parking program for people living in vehicles. Do you support those type of programs since, even though it's nice today, another Del Norte winter is a lot closer than most of us might want to think? Would you support those types of programs, and what would you do to help them move forward if you're elected as a county supervisor?
We'll start with Mr. Stone.
Well, there's a number of things. One, I believe there should be programs to help support individuals and bring them in off the street. A safe parking area is a short-term gap that may work. I don't know. Might be legal issues or liability problems. I don't know. I would just like to read a couple things to you. This came out of the Del Norte housing, the community housing report. Okay, the element, housing element, 2022 to 2030. And these are the actual numbers. The housing stock is 9,405 units. Occupied units is 8151. Total unoccupied units is 1,254. That's unoccupied units. A total of 419 are presumed to be Airbnbs. 151 Airbnbs are actually on the books, so there's a problem there. When you get right down to it, how do you go through the process of taking care of people at the low end? When we cannot get our housing put together, what happens? At the low end, let's say I'm making minimum wage. I'm trying to maintain a house. I've got a young child and a wife. First thing, I'm going to ask my boss for more money so that I can pay my rent, because my rent keeps going up. Why? My rent keeps going up because there are more Airbnbs sucking the number of homes that are available out of the market. And so then what happens? It affects the business owner because he has to pay this increased salary if he wants to keep them. Right on top of that, it affects the county because we're losing revenues and so on. It just is a windfall, windfall, windfall. And we have to address these problems. They're all interrelated and they all need to be addressed.
Thank you. Ms. Sargent?
Could you repeat the question, please?
With the severe chronic homelessness problem that we have in this community, will you support and actively pursue getting some type of transitional housing built and or a safe parking program for people who are living in vehicles? Absolutely.
I've heard of the ones in Arcata that seems to be a really great safe solution for those who are living out of their cars. That is what they are having right now. So why not go with what it is that they can support themselves with, and help them figure it out from there. Then also the other transitional types of housing, definitely helping people go through programs and education so that they're accountable for upholding that living and being sustainable for themselves. Education is huge, and so is the community supports for that. The more that we have understanding for people's circumstances and not just look at them as a problem, that they are people, to bring people together to know that we can start looking at having the people we see as issues in the homelessness and just being using the area, sucking us, for better form of words, and for resources. They can be part of the solutions as well. And volunteering, having community services, those have been cited, that need that direction. They can volunteer and be part of the solution to help the community. I think there's a lot of buildings in the area that need to be addressed that we can volunteer as a community and rebuild.
Mr. Burgess?
So I think what you're asking about is kind of like the tiny home projects, communities.
Yes. And something for people who are living in vehicles.
Okay, yeah, so they did something similar, I believe, in Medford and in Chico. They just opened up, they're calling it the pallet housing or something along those lines. So I have not seen the studies. I'd be interested to read the documentation on what they actually found with those projects to see if it did help. I guess I would have an open mind. I don't have a clear answer of yes or no until I see the studies and see how they've worked.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
So I would support programs like that. I think the safe parking space is great for people that do have vehicles. For one thing, it's going to get those vehicles off the city streets. It'll go to an area where they could be obviously designated as safe, and they would not be creating blight in some other areas. As far as the tiny homes or the villages like Rogue Retreats, I think those are great. But again, I think it has to be paired with other services. I think if you just put people into a home, great, they're off the streets. Now we don't see them anymore. That's not the solution. The solution needs to be paired with programs that help them with their mental health issues, whether it's medication, counseling, et cetera. And then you have the substance abuse issues that you would need to have involved as well.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions?
I do. I hope I can make it very succinct. We often talk about people, whether they're people in jails or whether they're people who are homeless or whether they're people who have mental health problems or drug problems, in terms of their issues and their problems. Do you think it would be better if we started talking about them first as human beings deserving dignity and respect as all human beings do, and then have their problems be secondary to the fact that they're human beings?
We'll start with Ms. Sargent first.
Yes, absolutely. That's part of what I just said. Looking at people as just a problem and summing them up as one group and having identities that way really mentally destroys the person, having been identified that way, and also the people projecting that also affects their mental health as well. So
thank you. Mr. Burgess?
Absolutely. You have no idea what somebody's going through or has gone through that's gotten them into the state that they are. And just by finding out the simple information of that and talking with someone and understanding that they are human as well can really push leaps and bounds into solving their future problems.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
Yes, I do think that everyone needs to be identified as being a human being and treated with kindness and compassion. There is not a one-size-fits-all answer for anyone. Who knows why they went to a certain space? Was it a substance that made them become more mentally dependent or ill? I do know people that were dependent on drugs, were off of drugs for several years before they became what we would consider mentally stable.
Thank you. And Mr. Stone?
Everyone is a human being. Every one of us deserves love and compassion. Those are the basic tenets of our society. When we lose that, we lose ourselves. I think everyone should understand that this is a very complex issue. There are things being done at the state and federal level, and we have to somehow figure it out at the local level. And it comes down to us, the supervisors. And we just have to work with it. We have to figure it out. That's our job. That's what we're going to be. Leave it at that.
Up next are our questions that have been submitted to us online by the public. The format will be the same as the previous section. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to address each question.
And we'll start with Mr. Burgess. The first question is from Faith. Are you in favor of the Board of Supervisors giving the ambulance company a monopoly contract and the right for the company to charge whatever they want? If so, why?
So no, simple answer is no. Anytime you have a monopoly in anything, it can get very carried away very quickly. So no, I think at least bids or options, or I'm not sure the right term, but a single monopoly with anyone available to charge whatever they want at will is not a good option.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
So how have we identified them as being a monopoly? Did we go out to bid? Did we have an RFP? Did we go through a review process? What was the contract length? Also, most of the ambulance responses are for services that are paid by the government, Medi-Cal, what have you. So they're forced to accept a lower cost for that transport that they just have to absorb. The private or insurance that each individual might have definitely has a different cost. I don't know if it's disproportionate from what another ambulance company might charge in another area. I would be curious to know the background on it.
Thank you. Mr. Stone?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Are you in favor of the Board of Supervisors giving the ambulance company a monopoly contract and the right for the company to charge whatever they want? If so, why?
Well, first of all, I'm not in favor of monopolies. Number two, there are state laws that require competitive bidding. Number three, I don't know what the particular situation is without reading it and reading the documents in front of me as to what it is that they're going to do. You know, like Patty said, there's an RFQ or an RFP process. The county is required by law to go through this process. So the question is, can they do it with multiple vendors? Those are legal questions, and I would depend upon my county council to sit there and advise me on that question. And that's basically how that works. We just have to understand what the problem is, be advised by the proper people as to how to do it, and then make some decisions. And we have to ask some very good questions along the way. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
Thank you. Ms. Sargent?
I'm not in favor of monopolies, but there's not much competition here in this small county. And I don't suggest that we place another competition in here with them. I don't think we have the resources for that. But I definitely think that their prices need to be reasonable. They need to be looked into to make sure they are meeting guidelines and not just boost the prices just because. There is a lot of layers to be looked at and to decide if they're being fair within their decisions on how they want to bill and work within their company. That's what I have to say.
Thank you.
The next question comes from Bill. There is one county park located in District 4, Florence Keller. Do you support the current practice of charging children and their families $5 per day to use the park's playground and hiking trails?
We'll start with Ms. Adams.
Yes, I do. That's a very small nominal fee. I don't feel that it's egregious to anyone to pay that amount. And I think that when they're coming to the park, they're probably depositing some trash. Maybe they're drinking the water. Why wouldn't we pass on a small charge to support the staff that has to take care of the park?
Thank you. Mr. Stone?
I agree. It's a beautiful little park over there. And, we have to, as a society, we have to pay for things. I mean, we just don't get a free ride. And it is a nominal fee. I think individuals in this day and age expect to pay for things. And we need to provide for the water, the garbage. We have to, dispose of everything and clean it up and have the maintenance crews there. So yeah, it's one way to offset the costs of running the park. So I'm in favor of it. I just let it go with that.
Thank you. Ms. Sargent?
The first thing that comes to mind for me is the children. If they're going over there to want to play, are they expected to be paying $5? What if they can't afford that? What is it that some of this has been, how can we look at that? Because I can understand that we need to have some costs for this and that, but there's costs for staying the night there. So the biggest impact I can see for that kind of cost, I think it's in general, a good idea. But if it's impacting for children and what they are wanting to go do freely, I would say that if that's causing a problem, then I wouldn't be for that. So.
Thank you. Mr. Burgess?
Can you clarify if that was for just like a single mom or a mom and a child or dad and a child, whoever it is, just coming through and playing in the park?
$5 per car is what it is.
Just to come in
Just
and
to
play.
park and play at the playground.
Okay.
Day
So,
use fee.
absolutely not. I am not okay with that. I am not all right with limiting a family coming out and trying to enjoy the weather and exercising. Now, if you're talking about using the park for, say, a birthday party or a function where you're occupying the entire picnic area and all of the garbage, sure, a nominal fee is okay with that. But for the average person just driving in, wanting to push their kid on a swing, there's no way. No.
Thank you. Our next question, or our last question, comes from John. How do you feel about Crescent Fire and Rescue being a volunteer fire department with almost 2,000 calls a year? And if you're fine with it being an all-volunteer fire department, would you also ask our sheriff and police departments as well as city employees and county employees to be volunteer also? And we will start with Mr. Stone.
Well, I can say this much. When I was much younger, I was a volunteer fireman. So I've been there, done that. I think it's important part of everything, but at the same time, as we move forward, we're a growing city. We need to have a professional firefighting force. It helps by having a professional force. It helps lower the insurance rates on your home, and it has other benefits. Again, how do you fund it? That's your biggest question. I'm in favor of the fire department. What are you going to do if your house catches fire? I would want the best guys that can do it to put it out. I mean, it's that simple. But we have to find out how to pay for it. These are, again, they all come back down to this number right here. What are we going to pay for it? How are we going to do it? It's great to have ideas. It's hard to come up with decision-making policies to understand how to pay for things. And that's one of the toughest things in government that you have to do. You have to make decisions about what is the best thing you can do for the public. And it's a big burden, and it can weigh on you seriously. So it's something you really have to want to do, and you really have to work at it. And I'll say this much. As a harbor commissioner, I literally work at my job anywhere from 7 to 8 hours a day, sometimes 10 and 11. So that's the nature of the beast. It's what you do.
Thank you. Ms. Sargent?
Repeat the question?
How do you feel about Crescent Fire and Rescue being a volunteer fire department with almost 2,000 calls a year? And if you're fine with it being an all-volunteer fire department, would you also ask our sheriff and police departments, as well as city employees and county employees, to be a volunteer also?
I think if it's not broke, don't fix it. But if there is some improvement that needs to be made there, and we can find the support within the community for the funding for the volunteers at the fire department, and to make them more of an actual job, if that is what it is you're asking. And no, I don't think that our police should be volunteers, although I think it'd be an interesting option to also have a volunteer level, so that we can bring more community into service. I think that would be a very interesting option. But that's basically what I think about that topic.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Burgess?
So our volunteer fire department's pretty amazing. You make a 911 call, you're going to have, 20 volunteer fire department people there. They're not there for the money. They do it because they love it. They do it because they want to help our community. They get a very small stipend, and it doesn't amount to their time that they're there for. There are a few paid positions, I believe, in the fire department for I think the chief is paid, and some people that are on call 24 hours a day sometimes, and they deserve it. Now, the volunteers, I don't think they're doing it for money. I mean, I know they're not doing it for money. And if you made it a paid position, you would lose all your volunteers. And I don't believe it's the same as the sheriff's department. It's not, I don't think you could just have someone roll in and make an arrest on their leisure. So the volunteers, the fire department's very unique, and I think we need to support them through equipment and the tools they need, and keep them going as strong as we possibly can.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
So if I understand correctly, they're saying that this volunteer fire department responded to so many calls, and are you asking if we would disband our current departments and have them become volunteers?
If you're fine with the fire department, I'm just restating the question. If you're fine with it being an all-volunteer fire department, would you also ask our sheriff and police departments, as well as city employees and county employees, to be a volunteer also?
Never. Never. They're paid employees because they're trained employees. They continually go to training. There are requirements for equipment, vehicles, the bottles that the firemen wear when they go into a burning building. It absolutely needs to be a funded department, and kudos to every single volunteer firefighter that goes out there and risks their lives. But no, I think leave the professionals where they are.
Thank you.
And that's all the public comments we have time for tonight. To wrap up tonight's candidate forums, each candidate has 2 minutes to make their closing statements. We'll begin with Brian Stone.
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody at this forum, and thank you for presenting it, and thank you for the very good questions. I want everybody in the audience, as well as those listening and watching, this is a job interview. This is a nonpartisan race. What you're doing here is you're trying to choose the best qualified person for the job, the one that's going to work for you. I have 23 years of experience at the state and local level. I also am a private business owner in the past and 21 years of experience in the private sector. I helped a failing agency come back from the brink of bankruptcy. We were losing $498,000 a year, and it was within 2 years of absolutely shutting its doors. We now are running a $1.3 million positive cash flow into the future. When I'm elected, I can hit the ground running. I'll be able to do the job, walk right in and start working. I would like to think about a few things, but first, and I would just like to say, it would truly be an honor to work for you. It really would. And it would be something that I would like to do passionately. So what I'm going to do is leave it at that. I'm asking you for your vote on June the 7th, and I want to thank all of you for listening, and I thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you for your statement. Up next is Margaret Sargent.
I know Roger Gitlin's definitely going to kill me for this one, but I'm not here because I definitely just want to win. That's not why I'm here. I know I'm not dumb, because it takes a few times of trying this and getting yourself out there in order to gain a position like this in general, because many have done this. What I'm looking for is to plant a seed. What I'm looking at is encouraging our community to see that complaining after the fact of having choices being made for them is not the answer. It creates bad mental health and lack of security within our community. We need to start relying on our community as a whole to start showing our children and leading and showing how the framers who started this community built it, and start rebuilding the things that are crumbling, because we see many of the buildings around that need to be refurbished. How about we just start kicking in, just like our forefathers used to within the framers, and say, okay, county, kick in after we're starting this project. We want to have this project starting. We really want this to go forward. Now I want you guys to fill in the gaps instead of having them tell the people what to do. Actually do what our forefathers of the country said our duty is to self-govern, and as a warning to us is to tell them how to do their job. I believe that that is what we're needing to do, have meetings with ourselves, with our people, and decide on what direction our county needs to go in as a people, as a unit, and
Thank you.
build mental health security there.
Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. Up next is Joey Borges.
So I'm here because I love this county, love this community. I want to see it great again. I have zero experience as a politician, and I think that's kind of what we need. I have hard work, I have good ethics, and I'm here to do what's best and do what I can to help this community. It's my only reason and my only agenda here. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. Up next is Patty Adams.
Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here to answer your questions. I'd like to remind you that I was raised here and understand the challenges that a small community such as ours faces, and I'd like to be part of the solution to bring improvements to Del Norte County. I will focus on a few key areas. Economic development. This is in my wheelhouse, and I feel that I can be effective in trying to identify new industries, more jobs, and more money to bring to our residents. Healthcare or mental health staffing. How do we recruit and retain these professionals that are so needed for our area? One of my suggestions would be to go to job fairs at medical schools to attract young doctors that have more of an interest in the outdoors and would choose to stay for a duration. Also recruiting mental health staff in much the same way, including grants or internships. Homelessness and blight. While this is a painful and ongoing project, it must be faced. We cannot end homelessness, but we can alleviate some of it with a wraparound approach, housing combined with mental health or medication and substance abuse programs. Housing. Our current housing shortage is affecting almost every area in our community. We don't have the housing for new COs, new teachers, or other employees, as well as our regular renters. There are many grants available that pair public and private companies to build together homes and housing. We need to focus on all efforts. Roads and infrastructure. When I met with Jerry Hemmingson, he said the biggest concern that he heard from District 4 residents were the amount of potholes. Maybe I will become known as Pothole Patty, as I will make our roads a priority. Thank you. I'm asking for your vote.
Thank you for your statement. And I'd like to thank Brian Stone, Margaret Sargent, Joey Borges, and Patty Adams for taking part in tonight's forums. I'd also like to thank the United Methodist Church for providing the venue.
Yes, thank you so much to each of the candidates for coming out tonight and sharing your values with the community you may soon be representing. And thanks to everyone who put this forum together. We have one last district forum next Tuesday, the 10th at 6 p.m. We're going to be hearing from the candidates of District 5. So please tune in so that you can make an informed decision come Election Day. Thanks and have a good night.
Thank you for joining us for tonight's District 4 Candidate Forum. Tonight's forum will remain available for viewing on Facebook and will be posted to the Redwood Voice YouTube channel later this week. Join us next Tuesday, May 10th, for the District 5 Candidate Forum, brought to you by Redwood Voice and KFUG Community Radio. Good night, everyone.